We're really pleased to be able to have a guest today, Martha Hayward, who I was introduced to about a year ago, where she spoke about this very topic, moving from what's the matter to what matters most, and talking some about the conversation project she's been involved in. Martha, since 2001, has been the lead for public and patient engagement with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and we participated in a number of things that the IHA has done, and we know what a wonderful resource they are. She has a background in marketing and communications, but she came to the role where she is with IHI really because of experiences she's had both as a patient but as a family member of a patient as well. And it's that perspective that she brings to the IHI. In fact, I remember on the phone call, I think it might have been Jim, said that they really were glad that they brought Martha on to the IHI as the patient and family or patient and public advocacy voice or engagement voice. But he said there are times in the meetings they really wish they hadn't. So you're going to find today that Martha is provocative. She kind of tells it like it is. And this is really important for us because as we start on our journey to better engage our patients and the families in helping them to better manage their health or better manage the outcome or to the outcome that they desire, I think the kinds of things that Martha's talking about today will help us be able to create that framework. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce Martha Hayward.
I'm sort of plugged and wired here with my little Madonna microphone and my messy hair, so we have to talk about first the humidity. Okay. I know. What do we do about the hair here in Austin?
At least you have hair.
And the response was, at least I have hair. So I've been talking to your leadership, and I'm really happy to talk sort of broadly to this group here about this whole idea of what it means to have a patient-centered environment, what it means to engage patients. I think that a lot of people, and it was Jeff Selberg who said that, my COO, who went out and went talking and said, yes, I really, many days would prefer we didn't have her there. And I don't take that personally because the patient voice, when you introduce and you accept and you welcome the patient family voice into the work that you're doing, it's often disruptive. But would you have asked for it to be anything less? Because what we're recognizing is we need to have change in our healthcare system. And that change, oftentimes people think, well, if we bring the patient voice in, that means the patient just takes over. We just have to do everything the patient said. Well, no, not really. Just want to be part of the party here. And you wouldn't give that over to just anybody. I mean, if the nurses say, well, we want to have a stronger voice, you say, oh, let's just give the entire hospital and all operations over to the nurses. But it is a disruptive voice. And change, remarkably, means change, right? If you're going to change, it's going to change the way you do work. It's going to change your behavior. And in this case, I think it could very well lead to life changes for many people because we've gotten so far away from and lost the humanism in care. I have yet to meet, and I want to be accurate about this because I think it's true. I have yet to meet anyone in the travels that I've been through and in my own personal experience as a patient or as a family member within a hospital who got involved with the healthcare system for anything less than to care for people. And I'm talking about the pride that parking lot attendants take in greeting patients. I'm talking about one of my experiences. We were doing a collaborative with HCA, and we had each of the hospitals before we all met together. It was all inpatient experience. And before we all met together, we had them write to us and talk about some of the things that they were doing in patient experience. And we consider ourselves very important. And so one of the hospitals wrote in that their EBS people, that one of the favorite things was that they were making origami animals out of the washcloths. Well, this turned into a company-wide joke. And we were all like, well, what it all really comes down to is the origami animals. Because what we're constantly trying to say is, it's not about the next nice gesture. It's not about cookies. It's about a whole systems change. But then, when we met this group, and we started, I was talking to the EBS people, so we turned it into a big joke. I'm being very revealing here, okay? Because it was kind of snobby of us. And I was for fun of it. And when we finally met these folks, when we had our first learning session with them, I sat down, and there was the CEO and the chief nursing officer, chief medical officer, and the head of EBS. And they started to talk about the damn origami animals. And at first, I was just choking back wanting to just say something about these origami animals. And then I really listened. And I realized what this meant to the patients. And having recently had been admitted for emergency surgery, I remember coming into the room. There was nobody in the other bed, but that didn't mean that I was in, and it was a shared room. I didn't know where that person was. And I went to use the bathroom, and there were 2 stacks of towels, and I couldn't tell what might have been mine and what might have been theirs. I didn't know what was clean or dirty or used or not used. I felt completely lost, and I ended up washing my hands and doing this, but not wanting to wash my face because I was in a hospital, and I don't want to use somebody else's stuff. And so here they were talking about how the origami animals, the kids would come, parents, children would come in, and somebody would make them the origami animal. And I realized it was a symbol. It wasn't just about the origami animals. It was a symbol of how everybody felt connected to that patient's care. And that EBS person felt strongly enough to individualize these little animals and became sort of this very popular person. And what they used that for, to integrate family members, was really sweet. And sometimes it's the little things that do matter the most. And at IHI, we really, Susan Edgman-Levitin, who's a patient advocate, she works at MGH, coined this phrase, we need to move from what's the matter to what matters most. And our CEO, Maureen Bizignano, has picked up on it, and it's really becoming, you're hearing it sort of all over the world now. And I feel as if, can you feel that difference between what's the matter and what matters most? And really, it's not actually moving from one to the other, but in every encounter, moving, you need to ask the questions, what's the matter? We need to provide a diagnosis and our clinical support. But then, in moving forward with a patient from the place where we know what we're doing, as diagnosticians, as clinicians, in terms of treatment, we need to start to look at, for each patient, what matters most to you. For the diabetic who is overweight, living with a drug-addicted son, and lives 16 blocks from a Walgreens, this is what matters most. Maybe that their medication be delivered to their home because they can't get to that pharmacy. And she's not going to send her drug-addicted son to the pharmacy, I can tell you that right now. And if she does, he's not going to come back with the right drugs. But anyway, for the person, I mean, we've been sharing stories all morning. For the person who's dying, who says, I want every means necessary to keep me alive, without asking the question why, you don't find out that he has 63 days left before all the money that he's been saving can be sent to El Salvador, to his family, so that they can come over. So he wants to be alive for 63 days, so he doesn't lose a lifetime of savings. That's very different from, I want every means necessary to keep me alive, period, right? We need to understand what matters and why. I want to share this little film with you, if I can do it. And behind my potted palm right here, I have my lovely assistant, Vonna. I want to share this because I say, you know, why are we interested now? And I think this is something that's from the internet, because all learning comes from the internet, am I right? But this is something that I've seen recently that I really think brings meaning to where we're at and why we need to be doing the work that we're doing. So this is about, I think this is 4 minutes. So let's share this film. as I was just standing there, watching this, I wrote the film for UTMB. And what I know about this place is that you've survived a hurricane, and you're still in the process of surviving it. And just earlier today, I realized that what you've been through as a community is equal to, and in so many ways parallels what patients and their families go through when they go through a medical crisis. And I would be interested in seeing a film from UTMB that says, we know how to heal, we've done it, and we can help you do it. That was pretty good.
You're cheap, too.
I just gave that away, didn't I? But really showing, because it's very, very similar. I mean, there are things as you survive a crisis, a medical crisis, there are things that aren't perfect moving out of that. It's not perfect to have your food services 2 blocks away from the hospital. I understand that. But you set different priorities when you've learned how to heal. And you all have done it. And I think that's the match, understanding who you are as a community and what you have to offer. If you can access that, what I love about that piece, and that's from Cleveland Clinic, obviously, what I love about that, and what really shows and reflects in the work that as I'm learning, is that focusing on the patient experience, you do so much. Everything falls into line. But one of the biggest things is that it brings the humanness back to the work that we're doing. And in that humanness, the people who benefit, in addition to patients and their family, are staff. That's the meaning in your job. And to return that, and I loved how this film shows that every single one of us is a human being. And we bring to our work every day whatever our experiences are, and we can make that part of our work, and we can be known for that. So one of the things that we're doing at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, when I first came on, I had been working with my colleague Jim Conway on what we call a framework for public and patient engagement. And it's based on the model for improvement. It just basically states that if you want to affect the patient experience, you need to be working if you picture concentric circles, you need to be working at the systems level, so what's happening on the floor, in the doctor's office, at the organizational level, what is the organization doing to support actions that you might be, that will affect your ability to deliver care to that patient. And then what are you doing in the environment to affect the assumptions and the way the patient comes to the medical interaction, or the systems interaction. And what we realized in doing this was that the medical system, I call this the most prepared for revolution in history, because the medical system has been working within the medical system to make the medical system better for 25 years. They've never told the people who are accessing the medical system that all this improvement work has been going on. And so our relationship remains the same with the medical system, which we're coming as patients or as consumers, the medical system feeling, a lot of bad things right now. I mean, people aren't reaching out and making it clear. We're not asking people to change their relationship with the medical system, and we're not telling them how the medical system is changing and what our aspirations are. And so what we realized is we needed to be doing more work on a public level with the public at IHI. And at the time that I had come on, Ellen Goodman, I don't know how many people are familiar with Ellen, but she's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from Boston. And she was syndicated throughout the country. And particularly close to me because at the time when I was down at school in Washington, D.C., and my mom lived in Boston, and she and I would say, do you guys remember mail? The thing with the envelope and the stamp? Remember those? You remember newspapers? You remember those when you cut the thing out and you had scissors and everything? So my mother and I were constantly sending back and forth to one another Ellen Goodman columns with little notes on them saying, oh my God, was she sitting at dinner with us last Thanksgiving? Because she just seemed to get the whole family thing, the whole mother-daughter thing. So in walks Ellen Goodman to the Institute for Healthcare Improvement saying, I have something called the Conversation Project. Can you work with me? How can we work together? And I saw that as a huge opportunity because what she was saying is that she did work with a group of people, and what they realized they needed was a public campaign about end of life. Now, Ellen had come to this soon after her mother had died. And why? Because as a journalist, she recalls sitting sitting at the office of the Boston Globe, typing away. Her mother was in the hospital, and the phone rings, and the following question comes: Ms. Goodman, your mother has pneumonia. Should we treat it with antibiotics? Everybody here knows what that means. It was a life or death decision. But Ellen realized in that moment she was totally unprepared to answer that question. She hadn't had the conversation with her mother. She hadn't had the conversation with her brother. And she never knew she was going to be faced with this decision, this question. So after the death of her mother, she had gotten together with this group of people who came together and included people in marketing, doctors, preachers, a whole variety of friends who had had similar experiences. And everybody has a story about end of life. Everybody in this room has a story about end of life. And most of them aren't really positive. Some people have really positive ones, and we're looking for those. We're looking for all the stories. And this was the group who decided we needed to change the way, the change around how we manage end-of-life care needs to come from the public. It needs, not from within the system, but we need to change people's behaviors coming into the system. Because the system has everything available to it. And when you come into the medical system, you'll be offered everything available. Right now, out in the public, we tend to go into the medical system as victims saying, oh, okay, whatever you have to offer, I'll take it. But that's not always what we want. It would be like going into the Gap. You know, I go in and I know that I'm going to be going to Galveston, it's going to be boiling hot and humid, and I need a sleeveless shirt. And I say, I need a sleeveless shirt. And they may say to me, do you want pants? Would you like it in 3 colors? Yeah, sure, I'll take it in 3 colors. And I pay my $30 and I leave. But the way we utilize the medical system, we walk in and we say, I'm here, and the Gap would bring us $700 worth of clothes, put it in our arms, take our $700 and say, okay, now go home. You have everything you need. Why do we approach the medical system that way? And particularly at end of life. So the combination that this was the opportunity for the Institute for Healthcare Improvement to really test what it would be like to engage the public, and that this group had come to the understanding that they needed to do a national campaign. And it's basically a national campaign using traditional media and new media, social media. Oh yes, I've done a Google, Hangout. This is the new thing. It's so new that nobody knows what it is. And I still won't know what it is. But I did it with some guy from US News and World. So I did a Google Hangout. You'll be hearing that about 10 years from now. But it's a campaign that all people's end-of-life wishes will be expressed and respected. So to express your wishes, what do you need to know? You need to know what your options are. You need to know what your ethics are. You need to know what your family history is. You need to really consider here's the biggest thing you need to know. IHI is a research-based organization. We always do our research. Here's the biggest thing you need to know. 100% of people will die. This is not a commonly accepted fact. It is, however, a fact. This is the most denied fact in American culture, right? We are the most death-denying society. We do not have proper rituals around it. We do not talk about it. And so that expression, that is what the Conversation Project is about. Nothing less than cultural change. And we won't stop till we're done. And so we have started. And the respected piece means that family members and institutions will need to learn how to respect people's wishes. It will be very different if we do our job and we have an activated public that's articulate about, my mother was very clear that she only wanted fluids at the time, in any situation, in any crisis, she would only want fluids, and she would not want any extraordinary measures whatsoever. or we really have to insist that we do everything possible because my dad said this is what he wanted. He wanted to be alive no matter what, and his technology was his friend in this. Can we respect those wishes? It takes training, it takes hard work. And the whole All of Conversation project is based on people sharing the stories. This is from the website, and this our beacon is really the Conversation Starter Kit. So this isn't an advanced directive where you have to sit down and fill out all of these, yes, I want to be intubated, no, I don't. The Conversation Starter Kit really brings you through this process, pre-advanced directive, where you're asking yourself the question, who might you talk to? Who would you want to have this conversation with? Let me give you a hint. It's going to be at least 2 people. When I ask this question to people, who would you talk to? They always say, well, my wife and I would talk about it. Or my husband and I would talk about it. Or my partner and I would talk about it. Okay, that's great. But when you talk to your partner about it, and you're in a position where you can't speak for yourself, what's going to happen? You know how everybody has like a sister in California or a brother in Ohio who will fly in at the last minute? Everybody has one of those, right? You've got one in your family and you've all dealt with them. Well, when that person comes in who has a different relationship with your spouse or with whoever's dying and says, you're killing that person, or this isn't what she wanted, that person has no support. So it's always 2 people. That's just my little personal hint to you. And I'll tell you my personal story exactly why. My mother was very accomplished. My mother once said to me, which I think is kind of weird, but she once said to me, you're just like me, but more so. Kind of weird, but anyway. So my mother was an executive with Mass General Hospital and Harvard Medical School, and when she retired, she was the vice president for development for BU Medical School. She's a pretty accomplished lady, and had very, very strong opinions around it. She was one of these people. If I get like that, put a bullet to my head. If I get like that, put a pillow over my head. So as life went on, my mother underwent a back surgery, and she went through that cycle where there was the surgery, the rehabilitation, the return to home, the fall, that spiraling down, that Joanne Lips spiraling down thing. And she spent about 6-7 months completely out of it. She didn't know where she was. She really was deteriorating terribly. And she ended up with sepsis, was in the ICU, intubated. And this was the moment. And I stood next to my mother and weeping, saying goodbye to my mother, and through the tubes and everything, saying to her, I'm going to do what's right for you. And my sister came in, who actually is the proxy, and my sister, after a lot of crying and discussions with the doctor, and my sister said, I know you're ready, and I know Mom's ready, but I'm not ready. So what do? My mother, her worst nightmare, has been living in a nursing home for 3 years. Absolute worst nightmare. Now, what my mother did was she appointed my sister healthcare proxy, and then she came to me and she said, don't let Leslie keep me alive. And why did she say that? Because my sister had a cat who was 13 years old, and the cat had been under the bed for at least 4 years. I think the cat had been dead under the bed for 4 years. But anyway, the cat was under the bed for 4 years, and the cat developed cancer, and my sister paid $3,000 for chemotherapy for the cat that's been dead under the bed for 4 years. I mean, this is not somebody you want to have in your healthcare proxy if you don't want medical treatment, okay? But this is the reality of the situation that we're talking about. And my earliest piece this morning, I entitled The Primacy of the Patient. And I've learned so much about what could have happened had we been a society and in an institution that really understood the primacy of the patient. And that was, what if the doctor at that time had been trained? And I'm not saying anything against the doctor because they were brilliant, and he was so acutely aware of the knot that we were tied in, and what the results were going to be, because my sister wanted every medical thing done to make my mother live, and so ultimately she did. She has pretty good mental capacity, but no physical capacity. So it's her worst nightmare. I mean, she spent her life talking about that pillow. Somebody suggested to me, Lachlan Farrow from Harvard Medical School suggested to me that had everything been right, the doctor or somebody at that moment would have said, I can see that it's hard for you to respect your mother's wishes. What can we do to help you? Do you see how different the results would be? It's profound. And, to be perfectly honest, at this point in my life, but I have to tell you the most exciting thing. Oh, Kathy, I gotta tell you this. So on Mother's Day, my sister, my brother-in-law, my mother, and I had dinner together, and we had the conversation. And my mother said, I don't want these. We went through a whole long list. Mom, what would happen if you had a medical emergency? And she was so clear, and my sister, my brother-in-law, and I were there together. I affirmed with them, did you hear what she said? Are we all in agreement that we've heard? Mom, are you sure about what you're saying? My sister was so relieved. I can't tell you how differently I feel, because it was weighing on me every day. What if I'm away and this happens, and I'm not there to support Leslie, or I'm not there as a voice? It was brilliant, so I've had the conversation. So that's the turnaround in that story, Jan, so I'm really excited to be able to share that with you. But that's what the conversation starter kit does, is bring you to those real questions. We tend to think that the conversation about end of life is the purview of the elderly, but it's not. It's of all of us. And I have to say very poignantly that having what you've been through with the hurricane, what Boston just went through with the marathon, we're all at risk of death, sooner or later. And we don't necessarily, or decisions that need to be made for us or with us. We're also using, now as I just jumped from that very heavy thing to say, we're also using Facebook, which is a really wonderful way. I highly encourage anybody here, if you want to, one of the things that we're noticing, how many people, I don't know, when the Marriage Equality Act was being, how many people have Facebook pages? When the Marriage Equality Act was up, did anybody's friends turn their profile pictures into the little red, okay. So does anybody know what I'm talking about? So when Congress was looking at marriage equality, the symbol is a red box with a pink equal sign in it. And on that day, I woke up in the morning and a couple of my friends had it, and I thought, what? They don't even know each other. Why are they involved in the same thing? And then I realized, it was a show of support. So I changed my profile picture to the same thing, to show support for marriage equality. By the end of the day, it was a national phenomenon that millions of people had changed their profile pictures. So at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, if you open your Facebook page, everybody had the same symbol up. That's how quickly social media, and you should think about in your own work and as you're moving through with your relationship with the community, how to use social media to change your relationship and connect more with your community. So one of the things about working with Ellen Goodman is that Ellen really chronicled social change over the past 40 years, starting with the women's movement. She was the first female reporter at U.S. News and World Report. And just as a look at how quickly time passes, U.S. News and World Report no longer has a physical magazine. They're online only. I mean, wow, things have changed. But if you look at some of the other pieces of social change over the past years, the one that I like to focus on when we're talking about end-of-life care is really the birth movement. Because if you think about when I was born, and I'm almost 17 now, when I was born 55 years ago, my mother was anesthetized. And I probably should help me when I was, do you have a couch I can lie down and we can analyze me over this one? I was 72 hours old, probably 48 hours old before she held me. In the hospital for 5 to 6 days, went home with a nanny. My father, he never smoked cigars, so he was probably out there smoking a cigarette or something, while she was giving birth. The birth movement did not come about because doctors all stood and said, oh, you know what would make this whole experience better? It would be a bathtub. A bathtub would be awesome right now, and a video camera. Can't do another birth without a video camera. So who brought that suggestion? Women, families, men who didn't want to smoke cigars anymore. They wanted to be women. I mean, men who were recognizing, that's my baby happening there. I want to be part of this. And so I think about this as a social movement, changing the way we address end-of-life care. So this is a little piece of social movement history. So how does it start? And Ellen talks very personally about this, that it's about sharing stories. And through sharing those stories, you discover things. So this is how all human connection happens. Because we can't judge our own individual experiences outside the context of other people's experiences. So something happens to you, like the death of your mother, or being at someone's funeral and listening to how difficult it was for the family, or how beautifully and well put together the family is, and you think, wow, that didn't happen in deaths that I experienced. What do they have going for them? And learning through one another what you have in common. So it's that full feeling that you're not alone. These conversations, where do they take place? Coffee shops, thank God for Starbucks, the kitchen table. And really, the Conversation Project is all about bringing the end-of-life conversation to the kitchen table, to reduce the way, we medicalized birth by anesthetizing and doing all of that, and we've over-medicalized death. So let's bring the conversation to the table, to the kitchen table, where we can discuss what we want. Because the big thing about social change is that we want to envision, people always want to find the better way. And that's what we're moving toward. And then, it moves into institutions, which is part of the work that we're doing. I want to share this with you in what we're doing with the traditional media. And it's a huge media campaign. The advantage for the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, having Ellen Goodman running the Conversation Project, is brilliant because this is her place. And we've been in everything from Oprah Magazine in November, and you should keep an eye out for this because I think it's going to be really helpful. Women's Day Magazine is doing an issue on caregivers, and I think we're going to be sort of the central focus of that issue. So here's my question: how many people read Women's Day? Oh, so nobody reads Women's Day. So that's why it has the highest circulation of any magazine in America. We all read Women's Day. What else do you read at the doctor's office? So it's doctor's offices that are buying all those subscriptions. But we all read it. We don't admit to it. Some of us get it at home, but it's that traditional media has been an incredible push in terms of just getting end-of-life conversations into the lexicon. And one of our biggest things is that we have a partnership with ABC News. And I want to share with you, this was a story that was done back in November. Diane Sawyer and Bill Ritter both have they have a long-time interest in increasing the ease of conversation around the end of life. And so this was the piece that they did. And from the Potted Plant, this is the piece that they did that I want to share with you.
And finally tonight, ABC News wants to join you in something right at the heart of the American family. How we can all help the people who care about us make decisions near the end of our lives. And 9 out of 10 of you have told us that we should all be talking about it at all ages, what we want. And yet only a fraction of us have done it. And we know it makes a huge difference in the health of the caregiver as well as those cared for. So ABC News has taken cameras inside a vital, loving family, part of a new community, deciding to have the conversation. This is 85-year-old Norb and his daughter Maureen.
My dad is 85 today. He's still very, very active. He's a wonderful friend.
Throughout life, daughter and father have always talked about everything, except one thing: how to control the end of your life in the same way you control the prime of your life. So dad and daughter gather the family together, 3 generations, for an act of love.
And so now we're just asking that you share some of your thoughts about what you would like at the end of your life, so that we can honor your wishes.
They are part of something new underway for families in America that says having the conversation is a gift parents and children give each other. And there's proof of the difference it makes. Studies show depression rates plummet after a loss if the families have had the conversation. Renowned physician Dr. Atul Gawande says doctors and nurses see it firsthand.
When you're there in that moment and you're talking to the family and you're saying, how much will it bother your father if he ends up this way? And they say, more often than not, I don't know. We never talked about it. That it is incredibly traumatic for the family, for the doctors involved. There's often conflict. It can tear families apart.
So Dr. Gawande has become part of a team led by Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Ellen Goodman. It is called the Conversation Project. It is a kind of guide for families looking for a way to begin.
If we give them a way to talk about it and give people something to hang on to when they're afraid to start this conversation, they can do it and pass it on.
Families like the Jennings. They looked over the conversation guide before they sat down together. First, there's laughter.
My golf swing's still good.
And then Dad directly eases his daughter's guilt and worry about having put their mother in hospice.
I felt like that meant we were giving up on Mom.
She was in a lot of pain, and I think it was handled real well.
And next, Maureen asks her dad for clarity on what he considers a good end to a great life.
So if you were in a condition where you couldn't make decisions for yourself, how extreme would you want us to take measures to save your life versus letting you go?
Well, I think I'm ready to go anytime. You know, I wouldn't prolong anything. I mean, I've lived a great life. Pretty lucky. And because of you guys, you know. And
Unexpectedly, a grandson is inspired to speak up about his own wishes for his own life.
That if there was no meaningful communication, that I would want you to stop trying to intervene.
we aren't ready for you to go that soon.
Well, we're not ready for you to go that soon either, so.
And one by one, the others weigh in, all ages.
Don't do that.
Happy birthday, dear Grandma.
And with that, another family has joined a kind of estate planning for the heart.
Go!
A conversation beginning in America. So please tell us your stories in the days ahead about ways to begin the conversation with family members of all ages. Or if you don't want to have it, tell us about that too. My colleague and my friend, anchor Bill Ritter from WABC, and I will be reading your emails and looking at the great photos you're already sending us of your families. So go to abcnews.com, find the conversation and the guide, and we'll be seeing you right there.
Isn't that beautiful? And you see the multi-layers of gift that happens when you have this conversation, and intergenerationally what happened to have a grandson start to talk about it, and even the little kids, even if they were involved in the conversation, they're going to be the next generation to get involved. But the gift let's talk about language for a minute. That's really interesting to me. When the daughter says, "I always felt that when we put Mom in hospice, we had given up on her." That's so often, so many people relate hospice to giving up. And in our culture, we think if we're not doing everything technologically possible, that we've given up. Well, how about accept? And what about the terminology that we use? Currently, we're asking people to sign, "Do not resuscitate." I've been there and had to sign that, "Do not resuscitate" for my dad. What if we change that to allow natural death? One's an order to not provide something to someone you love, and the other is a gift to allow natural death. Think about the language that we use. Think about how we respond to that. We become so familiar, particularly in the work that you do, we become so familiar with the way it's been handed to us. We don't hear the effect on that individual who's dealing with that in the moment. And that gift that the Father gives to say, I'm ready to go, and I've lived a full life because of you. No child is going to forget that their parents said that. I mean, it's just, what we see time and time again is the lost opportunity in not having the conversation, and the amazing, amazing gift that it is to have the conversation, and the empowerment of going in as a family united, knowing what your loved one wants. And in many situations, it raises, if you've got, isn't it amazing how different siblings are? Wow. Like, you take any family, you think, I don't know a family I wouldn't sit there and say, wow, they all came from the same place, how is that possible? But that means different relationships. Sometimes there are different religions, different ethics, different everything. And the key is different relationships with the person who may be dying. And when you've come together around that person, and it's the primacy of what that person wants and nothing else, it's pretty special. So the last piece of this is our Conversation Ready campaign, because it's not going to do us a whole lot of good if we activate the American public and everybody has this strong sense of what they want and are willing to articulate that when they are in a medical setting. If we don't have medical settings that are prepared to do the work that needs to be done to be able to respect those wishes. And so we have a group of hospitals. Do I have them here? No, I don't. We have a group of hospitals that we're working with right now to write sort of a change package around what will it require and what will be the best practice in terms of creating a conversation-ready environment. I happen to think, because of how I think, is that conversation-ready isn't related to end of life, but is really related to how we deliver care. And I think this is where UTMB is talking about moving. The patient-centered care is in fact having everybody prepared to be in conversation with patients and families about what their needs are and integrating them in the health team. So it's not just, but very specifically around the end of life, what kinds of questions need to be asked and what kind of training. And number one on this training is that what we've learned is it all starts with each of us personally. And so we're working with not only hospitals, but companies as well to become conversation ready. And companies, the amount of time that companies lose and money that companies lose to family members, caregivers, who are stressed and suffer incredible depression and PTSD after a family member dies when they've been in a caregiving situation is astronomical. There are numbers for it. I don't have this numbers on my pen. But there are numbers for it. It's absolutely astronomical. And so the gift that companies can give is to help people engage in these conversations. So there will be less depression and less PTSD around being involved in the medical system around somebody's death. So our pioneers are working toward that. In primary care, in your clinics, this is where the conversation needs to begin in these clinics. Gunderson Lutheran out of across Wisconsin has a program, Respecting Choices, where there are 3 very specific conversations, and one is when it starts at your 50-year checkup, and a conversation about end of life. There's another conversation that happens at the time of an incident, whether it's a heart attack or a car accident or whatever. And then the third is when death is imminent, and they have very scripted conversations that they have, but very specifically about what, where you need to be, what we need to know in order to treat you well. And that's where the primary care office, these conversations should start early on. So the things that we created are the starter kit. We have a how to talk to your doctor, because a lot of people we come to find do not have family members or people who they want to have involved in this. We're working now on a coach's guide, so that we can, if you have whatever group you're involved in, if you have a professional group or a book club and you want to start to work with different groups at your community, to have these conversations. We're creating that. And then we're working also to create conversation communities. So we've been out to Contra Costa County, which is really hard to say many times, guys, Contra Costa County in California, and they've committed to bringing together business, clergy, medicine, and local activists in the community to become a conversation-ready community. We're working in North Carolina, in Denver, and in Massachusetts, working through all the different levels, all the touch points of where people live. So I guess the question I have at the end of the day is, have you had the conversation? Has anybody here had the conversation? See, you ask it in a medical group, and how many of you have had the conversation and are like, oh God, he's not going to stop because this is what he does. You know, people who are in the medical field, there's a lot of pressure. I think there's a lot of pressure on you to be the leaders of these conversations. I hope they were good. I hope that you continue. We often say it should have been called the Conversations Project, because this conversation is not something that should happen once, but it should be part of how we talk about life. It should be part of our families. It should be part of our culture, and keep it going. I want to share with you, just to close. Oh, there it is. Okay. So in one of our exercises very early on, don't read it over my shoulder. Okay, I'm going to read it. In one of our exercises very early on, the group that we were working with, Harvard Medical, came and did an exercise with the staff at IHI, those who volunteered to do it, and in terms of preparing for the conversation and having the conversation. So there was the preparing for, and then the homework was to go home and over that 2 weeks to have the conversation. And during that, one of our doctors, Karen Boudreau, wrote this, and I want to share it with you because I think it's just so beautiful, and it speaks to the simplicity and the beauty of it and the gift that it is. So she writes, "Don't panic, it's okay. Don't panic." I can't read the first thing. Oh. If you find yourself making a decision that you're not ready for, it's okay. I'll try to let you know what I would want for various circumstances, but if you come to something we didn't discuss, anticipate, it's okay. And if you come to a decision point, and what you decide results in my death, it's okay. You don't need to worry that you've caused my death. You haven't. I would have died because of my illness or my body failing or whatever. You don't need to feel responsible. Forgiveness is not required, but if you feel bad, responsible, guilty, first of all, don't. And second of all, you are loved and forgiven. If you're faced with a snap decision, don't panic. Choose comfort, choose home, choose less intervention, choose to be together at my side, holding my hand, singing, laughing, loving, believing, and carrying on. I will keep loving you and something you and being proud of you. How great is that? So I leave you with that. It's just a beautiful way to talk about end of life. And we do have a few minutes if there are any questions, thoughts, or stories that you'd like to share. Yes?
There's also a movement I've heard about on communications. I'm chaplain, responsible for the chaplain network. Are they called death cafes?
Death cafes, yes.
Yes. Is that part of the conversation or an outgrowth of that, or?
No, actually, there are a million things that are going on, literally a million things that are going on across the United States related to end-of-life care. I mean, everything from, I don't think Texas has a POLST program, a MOLST program, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment, but those are big in a couple of areas. Death cafes are gaining popularity, but there's an enormous amount of stuff. And what we looked at was, and this is a reason for the national campaign, is that there was so much stuff, and yet nothing sort of bringing it all together, nothing reaching everybody. And that's really what the Conversation Project is about. It's kind of the project to raise all boats. But deaf cafes for some have been really effective. There are a million ways to address it. Any other thoughts or stories or questions? Sure.
Do you go to the schools at all for starting at the younger age? I asked because one day my daughter, when she was 14, came to me and told me her wishes,
Oh my.
which started a conversation.
Wow.
And she heard it, they had this discussion in school, and I just know, really what brought that all about. It was a formal kind of thing at her school, but it was their work.
Yeah, it's funny, we're in this new age now. So yes and no. We are at IHI, we are now starting a field operation, what we're calling a field operation, because this is when, if you go back to the what social movements do, it's individuals coming together, which we're trying to promote through the website, and then it's the whole communities coming together. And so we're trying to promote that, and from that, through coaching people within communities, we ultimately want to get into schools, libraries, all kinds of settings. What's really interesting in the rapid way in which our world is changing, you have to remember, how recently was it that people didn't use the word cancer? It was very recently. And now, you get yogurt and there's something about cancer on it. You get a baseball cap, something about cancer on it. The numbers of things that we don't talk about, and end of life seems to be one of those things that we just don't talk about. With this group that I started, Women's Health Exchange, we make these beads, and they're sort of a teaching tool. There are 4 different size beads that reflect the size of tumors that you might feel through different detection things, ways of detection. And we, in what we were, a Girl Scout troop wanted to get together for their community service badge and make them. And one of the moms, did I mention that this was last year? So this was in the century. And one of them, maybe a lot of people feel this way, but one of the moms said, I think this is completely inappropriate. The girls, 12 years old, are far too young to be exposed to cancer, and it's really going to shake some people up. 3 of the girls in their troop, including my best friend, one woman who died of breast cancer, and 2 girls, their mothers, had breast cancer and survived breast cancer. And this woman's telling us that it's inappropriate to be doing community service around breast cancer because she did. So we're still in, there's that push-pull thing of getting into the schools. And we want to be sensitive to that, but that's how far we have to go. But it's a really good point.
We had been at a funeral after Dad's funeral, but she just had mentioned, I want that Sunday at my funeral. And so we started from that point to have our conversation. And on my phone is my mom's funeral plan, including the dress she wants to wear. And then every once in a while she'd say, well, I've changed my mind. Can you change your phone?
Oh, that's so great. That's so great.
But from that, then we could go backwards to, well, how did you want your life sustained?
Yeah.
Or what measures you take. But just something as simple as, I want that hymn at my funeral is what has worked for our family.
So a film that I didn't share with you because I didn't want to be showing you a whole series of films, but there's this 4-minute film that talks about sort of the evolution of where we are, that our medical systems are really planned and created, our communities are really planned and created around people in the 50s and 60s. And so we're servicing people in a way that is really antiquated. And I just lost my train of thought. There's not around your mom and the funeral service. Oh, sorry, I need food. Anyway, we're at time. Okay, I'll think of that. And I'll publish it in your newsletter. But I thank you so much for the time, and I hope that you all have the conversation or consider the conversation. Thank you.